Good evening, all. I would like to welcome everyone. We
This
have
conference will now be recorded.
some extra folks with us for a part of our agenda coming up, and I will call to order the February 15th meeting of the Monmouth City Council and ask for the roll call, please, Phyllis.
Counselor Belts?
Here.
Counselor Carey?
Here.
Counselor Lopez?
Here.
Counselor McKeel?
Here.
Counselor Oberst?
Yes.
Counselor Salinas Oliveras?
Here.
Mayor Kuntz?
I am here, and we'll rise for the flag salute. If I could ask Mr. Oberst if you'll lead us, and you can unmute and have everyone else mute.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Tonight we have our meeting agenda. We have a work session, and we have an executive session tonight. And I will session official. We will start first of all with our consent calendar. That is the minutes of the council. So are there any corrections or additions? Otherwise, I would ask for a motion to approve the consent calendar.
Move to approve.
I'll second. Oh, wait, you need a second. Oh, I'm always so slow at learning this.
Councilor Belts, you, and Councilor Salinas Oliveros and or McKeel, thank you. And all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Very much. We have a special presentation this evening, and this is from one of our longtime community partners. That is the Polk Community Development Corporation Services. And we have Rita Grady with us. Is this you or Suzanne to introduce? Or I believe,
I think that I don't have any opening comments. I'll
Okay.
just double check with Suzanne, but we're happy to welcome Rita and looking forward to you can just get to start right off, Rita.
thank you,
Okay.
Rita.
Well, good evening, everybody. After this nice, scary, sort of eventful few days we've just gone through, it's nice to see everybody. Thank you very much for inviting myself and some of our staff to talk to you a little bit about Polk Community Development Corporation. We are very pleased to be here. So as you know, my name is Rita Grady. I'm the Executive Director of Polk Community Development Corporation. We typically call it Polk CDC. And I have with me this evening 3 other staff members, each responsible for another area in our corporation. And they're going to talk with you also in a little bit. But first, I would like to start this evening just saying that affordable housing development is really the cornerstone of building healthy households and communities. And I'm sure that you are totally aware of Polk CDC for over 30 years. You can see from the outline that you received with your packet that we've been focused on providing housing for very vulnerable populations. Much of this housing requires supportive services specific to the needs of those populations in order to sustain healthy housing. And we partner, network, or collaborate with a wide variety of partners in the state, the region, and at local levels to ensure that measurable supportive services are provided specifically to each of the populations. Some of these are, and you may be familiar with many of these organizations: Oregon Housing and Community Services, Oregon Business Development, Mid-Willamette Valley Community Action Agency, local housing authorities, Polk County Services and Public Health and other resource services at multiple levels, DHS, Veterans Administration, Oregon Department of Veterans Administration, Confederated Tribes, and many more. And as you can expect, we work very closely with each jurisdiction as we propose to develop affordable housing. You will receive from us in any project that we're planning to develop, because we want to work closely with you in identifying the locations and the type of housing. Our developments range from housing special needs populations to working families. We maintain our own properties with our own staff, who work closely with all the residents of the property. We really like to put heart into the properties that we develop. And I think that you can see that our outline shows that our developments really are just the face of a very dynamic community building process, framed by a network of ongoing daily support to ensure healthy households in our country. We have plans to become certified as a community development financial institution, or a CDFI, through the U.S. Department of Treasury. And that will allow us to include mortgage lending for first-time homeowners, flexible loans, and commercial loans for business and business development in low-income areas. So we're excited to be here tonight, and we have programs that we deliver directly from our organization. So I'd like to introduce you to Kelly Burnham, who will talk next about some of those programs.
Hi, I'm Kelly Burnham. Happy to be here. Thank you for having me. I'm a licensed loan officer as well as a certified housing counselor here at Polk CDC. One of the programs that we manage and Polk CDC has been managing since 2010 is the Oregon Homeownership Stabilization Initiative Mortgage Payment Assistance Program. And that program makes payments for homeowners who are struggling financially and possibly facing foreclosure. It makes payments directly to their lenders to help save their homes. Just recently reopened that have fallen employment due to COVID-19. March 14th. Program, we've been able to help 780 homeowners stay. One of the other through the cost of living, it's the home buyers as well as secondary education. That program, we had 35, and I currently have 15 enrolled first-time home ownership. So that's a pretty exciting program as well. We also have the Carol Hensley Memorial Children's Fund, and through generous donations to that fund, we've been able to help 580 children in need with school supplies, school clothing, summer camps, and basic needs. We also offer on-site after-school summer lunch programs for children at our Park West and Woodbridge Meadow apartments. they have an after school program as well as summer lunch program in summer. And of course, due to COVID, we're not doing a lot of that now, sadly. Another one of the programs that we were very proud to help administer was last summer. We administered the Business Oregon City of Dallas COVID-19 Small Business Emergency Assistance Program for grants that was awarded to small businesses here in Dallas. We were able to make 32 grants to businesses that were negatively impacted by COVID, and those grants totaled $90,000. Happy to say that we will be, just now, we're administering the new grant that was offered by Community Development Block Grant COVID-19 to small businesses. We're getting ready to roll that out, and we will be contacting local cities in the area, and that grant will be available to eligible businesses in all of Polk County. So hopefully we'll be able to help a lot more. We have funds, available grant funds of $150,000. So we should be able, like I said, reach out to a whole lot more businesses and help them in need as well, because I know a lot of them are still struggling. And that's basically it. Thank you again for having me. Feel free to direct anybody in my direction if there's any of the programs that they might be interested in. I'll give a lot more information on it. And now I'm going to turn it over to Diana.
My name is Diana Satanovich, and I do program development and grant writing at Polk CDC. So the Housing Rehabilitation Block Grant Program administered by Business Oregon. And who's eligible? Only jurisdictions can apply for these funds. But the state, several years ago, changed the way you apply, jurisdiction, the minimum of 3 jurisdictions, and a private housing development and community development corporation to apply for the funds, get the funds. So the way it works, I'm going to try hard not to bore you with the details, because there's nothing like going through the due diligence of a state program to drive you crazy. So the way it works, hypothetically, if Monmouth, let me go back one step. So we formed in 2006 the Polk Regional Collaborative in order to be able to apply for the funds. And the Polk Regional Collaborative consists of 5 jurisdictions in Polk County: Falls City, Dallas, Monmouth, Independence, and Polk County outside of West Salem. And every time we apply for a grant, one of the jurisdictions becomes the lead applicant, and with the receipt of funds, anyone within Polk County non-entitlement areas is eligible to receive those funds. So they're shared across the board with every application and every grant we give. And so how you apply is you have to be invited. The state has to invite you. You simply let them know you're interested, and we do all this for you. And then they send you an application, which is an online application through the state's portal that comes to the city manager. And then the city manager shares the login process with me, the grant writer, and I prepare the application and the attachments that go with it. And then if there's a public hearing required, as with all CDBG projects, and we've managed that too. We do the notice and you conduct the public hearing. And then all of these issues are folded into the application, the approved minutes of the public hearing, and there are about 14 different attachments that go with it. And then we submit it. And if you receive an award, the next step is to set up the program. The administration of the program, there's a fair amount of due diligence. And then also the environmental review record needs to be prepared, and I do that. And our staff does everything with regard to the application, the setup, the administration, the environmental review, but it is all overseen by the jurisdiction, because the jurisdiction in the mind of the state is the responsible entity. And so we work very closely together. And in terms of roles and responsibilities, typically the mayor is the one who signs all legal documents, the highest elected official, but we work with the city manager, the finance department to process draws. So all that is done, cooperatively. And we just finished a grant with Independence that we're closing out, and we prepare all the closeout and reporting documentation as well. We have just begun a grant with Fall City that is underway, and we are just now setting up administration for an award that has been made to the city of Dallas for housing rehab. And so somewhere down the line this year, we may want to talk about a new application for housing rehabilitation. And if Monmouth is interested, we're interested as well. So I want to tell you that if you have any questions or you want to know more, please feel free to contact me or anyone at our organization, and we'd be happy to provide you more important information about this program. So now I'm going to hand this over to Kimberly, who is the program manager for the project, and she's going to tell you about the people, this is the important part of the program.
Thank you, Diana.
Thank you.
My name is Kimberly Lyle, and I'm the operations manager and the housing rehabilitation program manager for Polk CDC. Thank you for having us this evening. Diana touched on the competitive application process and the city's responsibilities at the time of award. I will be talking about the housing rehabilitation process on the consumer's level. We have two rehabilitation programs. One is a loan program and one is a CDBG grant program. Both programs are similar in process, but have different thresholds and guidelines. It's important to note that our organization is a portfolio lender licensed in the state of Oregon, with 2 staff members being licensed as mortgage loan originators registered with the NMLS. As Kelly said, she is one of the loan originators and I am the other one. All of our programs have the eligibility packet, where we collect information to identify what programs best fit the applicant. Through underwriting using standard industry practices, Polk CDC determines the best program fit, whether it be a loan or a CDBG grant. Eligibility simplified would be income qualifications for loan applicants. Gross income cannot exceed 125% of the area median income by household size, and the applicant needs to demonstrate repayment ability. Grant applicants, however, their gross income cannot exceed 80% of the area median income, and they have to demonstrate they have no repayment ability. After we've determined which program the applicant qualifies for, next Polk CDC sends the housing rehab specialist, Molly Owen, to perform a site visit at the residence. And at that time, she will determine if the structure is sound enough to warrant repair. And in cooperation with the homeowner, Molly determines the scope of work that meets eligibility. Eligible repairs include, but are not limited to, repair or replacement of roof, plumbing, electrical, septic, connecting to sewer, shoring up foundations, and much more related to health, safety, accessibility, and structural soundness. Molly then sends the scope of work out to bid to local contractors. We require a minimum of 3 bids for the the owner to choose from. After the homeowner has decided on the contractor and settled on the final cost, the homeowner and Polk CDC enter into an agreement for an award or a loan to fund the project. The homeowner and contractor enter into a contract and construction begins. Polk CDC monitors the construction for completeness. However, the homeowner monitors construction for satisfaction. Progress payments are made at the approval of the homeowner, and at the end of the job, a lien release is issued by the contractor. And another house has been brought to good repair in our community. In closing, I want to report that in all, just shy of $2 million of housing rehab funds have been issued to Monmouth homeowners, either by grant or loan. And we look forward to more partnerships with the city of Monmouth. And at this time, I'm going to hand this back to Rita for closing statements. Thank you.
Rita, you're
Muted,
muted.
Rita.
Tell her. Somebody else tell her.
So again, I wanted to thank you for inviting us here so we could get acquainted with you and you could get acquainted with Polk CDC and some of our staff. We're really excited to launch a new project with you at some point in time when you are ready. I wanted to mention too that we have recently in the last few years been developing some affordable housing for homeless veterans. We started out by just buying one old house and having 5 bedrooms in there and moving some veterans in. And it's expanded now to where we are housing 25 veterans in our housing throughout Independence, Monmouth, and Dallas. And we are constructing 8 right now, 8 new units to add to that mix. And just got funded 10 other units to add to that. So we're excited to build housing wherever we can build it. We know we all have a need for more affordable housing. It's just, we're just in such a dire need for that. We are always looking for property. I'm always looking for property that we can either buy or acquire in some means. I know a lot of times cities are the recipients of properties that have been foreclosed on, unfortunately, and we're always looking for infill properties in particular because a lot of our tenants don't have cars. Some of them just need to walk to the store, whatever, healthcare, things like that. So if you have any ideas of community development projects, economic development ones, affordable housing, CDBG, housing rehab, we're here to help you and take the burden off from your shoulders to make the application and manage the programs, all like Diane said, with your oversight. So thank you again for inviting us, and we hope we see you all again very soon in the future.
Thank you so much, Rita, and Kelly, and Kimberly, and Diana. It is good to see you again and hear about these amazing programs. We don't quite give enough attention to them in our community, and share this word is great. And the website that explains a lot of this, their website, polkcdc.org, Polk Community Development Corporation. What questions, Council? Do you have any questions for this team? Yes, Councilor Salinas Oliveros.
Yes, thank you so much for your time tonight. Thank you for coming and all the good work that you're doing. I have to admit, I haven't been on your website yet, so my question may be answered already. And I'm assuming that you do have assistance for bilingual clients for families who speak Spanish, and you have materials that are also in Spanish.
Yes, that's absolutely correct. We just need to know when it's needed, and we can certainly provide that. Absolutely.
Great. Thank you so much.
Uh-huh.
Counselor McKeel and then Counselor Oberst.
This is incredible. I didn't even realize this resource is available. I have one question. You mentioned the affordable housing for homeless veterans. I was at a homeless meeting last week, and I think maybe Councilor Lopez can address this with more detail. But I heard that there's a great need in Monmouth for homes for young people, so youth. And I was wondering if that is something that you would look at, or it's because they're minors, it's not something that you could do, or?
I think sometimes in order for them to get assistance with rental assistance through like the housing authority, they need to be emancipated. And so I know there's a whole process for that. We are looking at, we have in our pipeline for Dallas, 20 units, 19 of them are 1-bedroom units. You know, I'm thinking that I'm fully aware that the younger population, young adults, young single adults, 18 and over is what I was targeting. Now, I'm not too familiar with the population that are under 18 years old and homeless, but certainly would be willing to look at that and see where we could find resources to help them. Absolutely.
Yes, Counselor Oberst.
Wondered, you mentioned the median income as a point around which loans and grants are wrapped. What is that amount at this point in Polk County? I'm sorry.
I was going to ask Kimberly to answer that question.
Okay.
Well, it's a little more complicated because it is based on the household size. So at this point, only right off the top of my head, can I tell you that 80% of the area median income for one individual is about $39,000.
Okay.
Which seems a little, is that right, Kelly? Because Kelly has
I have the income limits in front of me.
Okay.
A household one, 80% state median income for a household of one, you were very close, is $39,550. And then it goes right down. And it changes by HUD income limits, so it could be changing mid-March. They change every year. So it changes by what HUD goes by. But right now, one is 39.
Around what? Do you have in your listing there a family of 4, just to get an idea of how it changes?
I sure do. That's $56,500 for a household of 4.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'd like to say one other thing that, you know, for rental assistance for the housing that we develop, then that's looking more like to qualify for that is like 50% area median income. So Kelly, what would that be for a family of 4?
Family of 4, 50% would be $35,300.
For a family of 4? And that is,
Yes.
Yeah, that housing, that rental assistance would come through the local housing authority, West Valley Housing Authority. We find that we have been able to find rental assistance for our tenants from such a variety of places. Easter seals, even community corrections, when somebody really has a lot of barriers to get into affordable housing, we have been able to get them to pay some rent, which has been phenomenal. And mental health, DHS, Child Protective Services. But for the long-term permanent housing, the Housing Authority, you just can't encourage people to apply soon enough because there is a long waiting list now for housing. I think there's like 1,000 people on their waiting list.
Counselor Beltz.
I'm so interested in everything that you're talking about, and it's not anything that I've really been familiar with. Something that I do in my day job is I attend a lot of service integration team meetings in Polk, Marion, and Yamhill County. And I didn't recognize anyone here having attended any of those meetings. Do you have someone that attends those meetings?
Kimberly has attended some in the past. Our property portfolio manager, Jennifer Hernandez, has attended them. I've attended them. So I'm not sure what the attendance has been in the last 2 years.
No, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure because they often have people that are looking for housing resources, and everybody just shrugs their shoulders. And so I'll just make sure that I get your information and I pass it on to the service integration team coordinator so they know who to refer.
Sounds great. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. Other questions? Councilor Carey.
Just a couple of nuts and bolts things. This one is for Kimberly, and I didn't really get the sense on this, but you spoke primarily on the housing rehabilitation piece. How are those identified, or is that at the initiative of the property owner? And my assumption, I guess, is when you do a rehabilitation, that is of a rehabilitation of a property that someone is currently living in. The applicant would be actually living in, rather than rehabilitate a vacant property and move someone in. I guess there's a little lack of clarity on my part. You explained it, I'm sure, but how are they identified? What's the status of them when the rehabilitation begins?
Well, you're correct that it is homeowner occupied rehabilitation.
Okay.
So, yes, and they do live in the, if at all possible, they live in the home while it's being rehabilitated. It's not very often that we have such an extensive process that they have to have temporary relocation.
Now, is there pardon me?
Did I answer all your questions?
Yes, you did, but it spawned another one, and that is, what is the outreach part that the city can be involved in? Let's say that there is a property that pretty obviously needs some rehabilitation, to get it either to code or to fit better into the community or whatever it might be. Is there, or should there be an outreach function for the city to be involved with, to go and share information with the homeowner, to prod them along a bit? Is that common?
Sure. We have flyers if you wanted to leave a flyer. Social media is another outreach that we have. So if you were to advertise on your social media, that would be of help to us. But to reach out to the homeowner, you can always give them our information. And if you want to just send us the address, we can research it a little bit. Sometimes those homes are rental homes, so we need to find that information out before we approach the resident. And we can always knock on the door and leave a card. That's not a problem. So it could be either way. You could contact the homeowner or you can contact us and we'll reach out. And you had asked earlier how our clients find us or how that outreach happens. And that's pretty much how it works, is that they come to us. And but in some instance, the county sanitarian has referred people to us with septic issues. And some cities have contacted us about an address, and then we research it and approach.
Well, this would be, you know, and based on the questions and the comments, you know, a number of us are learning a lot of this and the detail on this for the first time. And so if we can find ways to outreach to this or reach out to this segment of our community, I think it would be very hopefully appreciated and helpful, certainly. So I think just counselors, we ought to think about ways that we can engage that process. So there need to be some conversation, but I think that's a good program to look into. Thank you, Kimberly. Appreciate it.
Of course.
Thanks, Sean. Great comment. And Councillor McKeel, let's see if we can make one last question.
Actually, this tags right off of Councillor Carey's comment. Do you have a sense of utilization in Monmouth? That we like? Are there the percentage of people using this service in Monmouth looking pretty good, or do you have a sense that we really need to get the word out to our residents? I mean, not that we wouldn't, but I'm just saying how drastic should we work?
Let me make one little comment. In the times past, we have had flyers or articles in your newsletter that goes out monthly. And also we've included flyers in your utility bills. Now, I don't know if that's still possible, but that has worked in the past. And as you know, that some years back, Monmouth actually did have a CDBG grant, and there were a number, probably usually about 20, I think you can get 15 or 20 projects completed every time you apply for a grant. So yeah, I think we could get together with your staff and come up with ways that we can market, you know, better. We can always improve on marketing, but we have had a good number of people, like Kimberly said, over $2 million put out into housing rehab grants and loans in the city of Monmouth. So, and that's been over a long period of time, of course. But the most you can apply for to have maybe a pot of money for housing rehab would be like, you know, $300,000, which would be available in any one grant. And if the maximum grant to an individual is $25,000, you can figure out about how many units you can get, how many homes you can get upgraded in that, just with that one application to the state. So there's no limit on how many applications we can submit on behalf of any municipality. So we get that one done, we can submit another one.
Again, thank you very much, Rita, for bringing your team and bringing this information. Extremely valuable and helpful to us, especially these days. We know folks are stressed, and having resources that we can share is invaluable. So thanks again for all you do here in Polk County, and we'll get the word out. We'll be in touch.
Thank you very much, and we'll all leave you now to the rest of your business. Thanks a lot. Talk to you again. Bye.
All right. That brings us to our report section, and tonight have a couple of things. We've certainly, it's been an eventful month, been an eventful year again already, but just in the last few days had some things to bring to our attention. First of all, I really, I think we all know how fortunate we are to have survived what we've survived with this ice storm. I was forwarded an email from someone at PGE who said that this is the worst 60 years. So the fact that we have survived so far to our knowledge, any loss of life, property damage certainly is here in our community. And I know neighbors have been out helping each other and helping strangers to get through this. We have some things that we are working on as a city to help our community to clean up after this. But the shout out that goes to our public works folks, our police department, and particularly, of course, Monmouth Power and Light. It was a long and stressful weekend. Working in circumstances, like as much as we all know we need to be prepared for natural disasters, I think the after action meetings on this sucker are gonna be a real hoot because all of our partner agencies are really struggling with the things we have faced. We know that we have had families without heat, without power, without communication. We have a failure not of our local merchants, but folks have not been able to access those benefits, retailers. So we have folks in our community who've gone without using their food cards and or had to pay cash for items. Department of Human Services we could help the community. I was up on as soon as the internet back. When Monmouth Power and Light, when our power went out, roughly 3:30 in the morning of the 13th, 4,089 meters went. We lost our transmission from Bonneville Power to the Monmouth trunk. We all went out once. That storm took out 8 poles and 3 transformers, but Bonneville restored its power to Monmouth about 12:30 in the afternoon on the 13th. And 2:36, according to my clock, it started up again. 80% has got our power back, less than 12 hours. And we all have friends in other parts of this area across the clock. We had 900 meters. By 7 o'clock the next morning, 100 more of those. By 9 o'clock the night of the 14th, Sunday night, they were down to 76 meters without power out of 4,700. And we got some reinforcements then. Tillamook PUD sent a crew to assist, and they worked through the night so that yesterday morning, 7 households in Monmouth woke up without power. 7, that's it. So Monmouth Power and Light did an incredible job for us. Bringing that up enabled us, of course, to get much of our communications back. Some of us are still without or limited cell service, but another shout out I got was Public Works, of course, was out trying to clear streets, work through things. Russ Cooper personally was delivering fuel for generators, not only throughout the city, but to the fire station, for example. We had a charging station in Main Street Park. the fire department also had a charging station because we have folks with medical devices that needed power. So there were a lot of folks helping out. Getting our power back within 12 hours preserved the function of not only our conveniences, but our entire water and sewer systems for the city, right? Those things depend on electricity as well. So working together, getting that done, and responding to community members, I just have to say, and poor Marty, because she had power and she was fine until we got our down because she doesn't live here in town. So it has been a challenge for all of us, and I just am completely impressed with the way individuals have stepped up, but our city staff, our finance staff was ready to helped out Power and Light. Everybody had a role in, and Suzanne community role in getting us through this. So lots of work still ahead, but I really want to mention that. We had a couple of losses today. I think many of you have heard the news. Our police department put out a notice that we had a tragic suicide incident in our city early this morning. 2 souls and 1 custody suspect is in custody for that. At least one of the people who is deceased, I know there are family members that a long time, and our heart goes out to families affected by that tragedy. And another tough loss this week for those of us who are longtime fans. Duke Iverson was the coach at Western Oregon University for many years. He also coached for Central High School and has been just an active and amazing guy in our community. And John, can you just give us a couple words about Duke, please? We lost him this week unexpectedly.
Yeah, Duke was a football coach. He was an interesting guy. He had his PhD from the University of Wisconsin was in forestry, and he never really did anything. He got into coaching football and was extremely innovative, and the best football coach I've ever worked with in my time coaching. He left us for a time and went back, was recruited back to Western State College in Colorado, was there for a stretch, and decided he wanted to come back to the Pacific Northwest. I hired him to come back, and he finished his collegiate career with us, and then helped Shane Hedrick for a long time and impacted a lot of our local kids in his role there. So he'll be a big loss. His wife is a delightful person and involved in the community. They both were, and tough one to lose, but it as we all know, it happens, and there'll be no replacing Duke, that's for sure. He's a genuine article.
Thank you, John. Some business. I would like to go ahead and get some reports of boards and commission activity for the last couple of weeks. And then we do have a few appointments to make. And I'll go through those and get your opinion on those. But do we have any reports from anyone at this point? Councilor McKeel.
I just want to offer kudos to Chuck Thurman, who sent in our application for Tree City USA, which was accepted for the 19th year in a row. So thank you to Chuck Thurman. Also, he led us all this last weekend to plant those 2 trees, 1 cherry and 1 plum. Don't you get your expectations up too much though, because there are only 3 buds on the cherry tree, so the pie will be very, very small. And I still have the note sitting right here on my computer, Councilor Carey, about the crepe myrtle. We haven't had a meeting yet, but it's this Thursday.
Thank you. Other reports, Councilor Salinas Oliveros.
Yes, the Historic Commission met on February 3rd virtually, and we had a wonderful guest, Liz Carter, who's our historic preservation consultant, and she was going through the application process and the information about the house on 342 Monmouth Avenue, I believe. And she talked a lot about some of the challenges due to COVID, you know, being able to go on site and take pictures and really examine the house. And also there's still some questions out there, especially about renovations that were made and when and the timeline. And then Liz also talked about the things that are left to do for this application process. The logo, the formal interview with photos from the owners who live there, some of the mapping, some of the floor plan sketching, and the formatting for the exterior of the house. So some basic framework. And then Liz explained to us that this is going to be a lengthy process, you know, depending when the application gets turned in. And it could be, we may not hear anything until fall or winter. And it just depends on when the application's turned in, and everybody's backed up with processing information. So, but she did some really amazing work for the Historic Commission. And then we did briefly talk about the mural project again, and talked, trying to bring about some guidelines for if we have artists who will be maybe taking up this project, some things left to confirm. And then just some questions about guidance. You know, do we want to talk a little bit about the land that we're on with the Calapooya Indians? Do we want to research, and we're researching who are the laborers for this railroad? Were they Chinese immigrants, or, you know, and so we're trying to find out more information to make sure that we have a complete guide for the artist for this mural project. And that's pretty much it. It was a very good meeting, and I don't know if Suzanne has anything else to add.
I think that was a great report. Thank you, Counselor.
Thank you. Councilor Oberst, then Councilor Lopez.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Parks Commission met on the 10th. First, a couple items of old business. There will be a new bike rack coming to General Woods Park. It is, for lack of a better term, a swooshy bike rider. It sits quite still, but it looks really fast. It'll have a little name tag on it that says General Woods Park. It's being created for us by Northwest Toys right here in town. So this is doing business with a local business. We're also still planning to have rehabilitation of the old high wheel bike style bike rack from in front of the former bike shop downtown, but no news on that. The Parks program gives out recreation grants every year. So far, we only have 2 applications in. Russ indicated he'll be doing some more outreach, both Facebook and Nextdoor kind of things, but also reaching out to our for-profit and nonprofit centers and making sure that folks are aware that these grants are available. There's information on the website. If you know anybody who would qualify for a grant for a recreation activity, with paying attention to COVID restrictions, please point them that direction. New business update on the skate park. Oregon State Parks grants, unfortunately, were not granted last year, which means that we've got a double dose of applications coming in this year. And on top of that, the funds for the program that we would probably qualify for come from the lottery. And since nobody's hanging out in bars playing video slots, I think that apparently the funds there are down. And so it's going to be tough for them to come up with money. There has been in-kind promise of rebar for that project. And the folks working on that are going try to start upping their activities to see if they can start raising more funds and getting more interest and making sure folks are aware. Maybe eventually a sign coming up on the S-curve saying future home of, but to make sure that people in town are aware that this project is, in fact, something that's there. There's a design consultant that's going to be brought on soon for that, and we'll just keep hoping that that skate park project moves forward. Interesting thing, we've always had CYS use the sports fields in town, particularly baseball, softball, and there's always just kind of been CYS says, can we use the fields? And sure. And now we have a little bit more competition with the formation of some club teams around particularly baseball, at least one. And so discussion around how to handle this, and the notion was to leave at this point for this year. This is new. This is mostly these other teams asking for practice rather than game time. But keep CYS as first priority, but see if we can get these two, these teams and CYS to talk and maybe parcel out field time so that everybody can use field. I think this points out that as we grow, we're going to need more sports fields. Of course, we are limited because the school district fields are, COVID is no longer a thing, not available. And that has put an additional push onto the few fields that we do have. So just be aware going forward, we're probably going to need to develop another baseball field or two. And there is a real shortage of soccer facility in the Monmouth Independence community at this point. Finally, Russ has been trying to just throw some ideas out at the commission for future developments in parks. Councilor Carey brought to my attention, and I immediately shoveled it off to Russ. He ran into a park that had some musical instrument play as a recreational activity. John confided that he confirmed once again his musical talent is not as high as his coaching talent. However, Russ brought a website to us with lots of really interesting ideas there. And so the commission is aware of that. I wanted to circle back to my last report where I talked about the fitness court thing. And one thing I did forget to mention, there's a national organization that gives a few $30,000 grants every year for these developments. Now, one costs $150,000 to $175,000. However, the city might be able to throw in some in-kind groundwork and prep work and so on. So this is just another piece that is available for the Parks Commission's consideration. Next meeting will be on the 10th again in March and online. And that's all I have.
Great, thank you. We just got word today that, and I'm hoping Suzanne got this as well. Nike has grants for physical activity type things, and they have primarily in the past served the Portland metro area. They have expanded, and Polk County is on their list of expanded opportunities. So I'm pretty sure we will be jumping on that opportunity for that skate park. So that's great. And Councilor Lopez.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I have Valley Homeless Alliance. We did meet now in our last council session. And this meeting was a non-standard format meeting. There were other homeless, a lot of other homeless providers, housing providers rather, I should say, as well as community partners that were invited to this meeting. And it was a much different format than how the meetings normally flow. So we broke out into a number of breakout groups. And the group that I attended was the group focusing on issues surrounding homelessness in rural communities. And the big takeaway from that group was that rural communities, and I'm sure that you won't be surprised at any of this, but rural communities have different issues than more urban communities surrounding homelessness. These range from compliance, landlord compliance regarding rental laws and tenant relations, to just basic services and how to connect individuals with services. The takeaway from this was that we need to be having more discussions about specifically rural areas and the issues that surround them. So I very much hope that I will be coming back in the future with reports from more detailed discussion around this and how it can impact and ultimately benefit the individuals that are at need in our community. But this was really a good first step in this direction for the rural areas of our Homeless Alliance, Monmouth and Independence included. Aside from the Mid-Willamette Valley Homeless Alliance, I do want to include MyNet in that call out for infrastructure successes. I know that there have been some issues with Easy Video, but internet came back for many individuals right as soon as the power came back on, and while cell phone service was still down, being able to connect with people through email, being able to connect with family members, being able to connect with those outlets for support throughout this recent crisis, whether it was through VoIP calling or other digital communications, was really essential. And I want to really tip my hat to the MyNet staff for getting that essential line of communication back up and going that we're all communicating on, or at least most of us right now as we speak. Even today, I still have issues with my cell phone here in town, as I'm sure many do. But we're able to video chat successfully. I know that there have been some issues with Easy Video. Those of us that do utilize that portion of MyNet. I'll remind you as well that Easy Video is a relatively local, they're not within the city, but they are a relatively local company. And so even though it sounds like this digital thing that just moves through the internet and these ones and zeros, right? There is physical infrastructure there, and they were hit by this terrible ice storm in a similar fashion to how we were. So hopefully that will all be, a moot point in the near future. But yes, everyone is still very hard at work, and many thanks to those that quite literally, put their own homes and own, lives in the way of keeping all of us safe and comfortable. And then my last report, I would like to just note that the Arts and Culture Commission will be meeting this Thursday virtually at 7 p.m. and we'll be meeting via GoToMeeting, similarly to how we'll be conducting these council sessions. So I hope all of you are there, and of course, as always, there's an open door. With that, I conclude my reports. Thank you, Mayor and ladies and gentlemen of the council.
Thank you, Chris. Any other reports? I know we have a meeting with Planning Commission tonight, so I have a feeling we'll be hearing more about those activities. So the other thing we have, we have probably a record number of applicants for boards and commissions at this time. Was very excited to see multiple applications in some case for some of our openings. And I appreciate, again, Councilor Salinas Oliveros and I went through those applications. I am going to ask indulgence on some appointments tonight. However, we actually have 4 applications for Planning Commission, and I had hoped to spend the weekend getting a chance for us to speak with those folks, but the weekend had other things in mind. And I am going to suggest that I'll have to bring those back. We'll bring back a planning commission appointment. We only have one opening on that. But so for your consideration tonight, we have a gentleman named Michael Jewell. Michael is actually an Independence resident. And every one of our boards and commissions, I believe, can have at least one non-city resident on the board or commission. Some of our commissions already have that representation. This one does not. So Michael made a compelling case for his interest as a longtime cyclist who wants to improve cycling conditions and focus on rider safety and access to cycling for new riders. So we would like to recommend his appointment. We have 2 openings on the Arts and Culture Commission, and we actually have 2 applicants. So one is a returning applicant. Sue Mason and Harold Mason have applied. They both have extensive experience. They're both visual artists and have extensive experience in the arts and actually in arts organizations. So I am thrilled that they are interested in furthering the work of the Arts and Culture Commission, and we would ask you to appoint them. Rich Boren applied for the Traffic Commission. That is a commission that meets quarterly. So we are going to welcome him to join that group. And when they have traffic safety issues to discuss, then we would have him join them. Stephanie DePascal has applied for one of the openings on our University City Connections Committee. That's a committee of Monmouth Engaged, and she actually was extremely interested in that work. She is very well aware of some of the work that is currently done between the university and, say, for example, the Senior Center. She'd like to really work on promoting our connection to Western, and we would welcome her to the UCC, University Community Connections Committee. We had another applicant from outside the community, Sabra Jewell. Sabra, actually, her first choice, I think, maybe she was interested in a couple of things. And her first choice was Parks and Recreation. Again, she lives in Independence. We have an opening for a non-resident on Parks and Rec. And John Oberst, she happens to explain that she would really love to help write grants for Parks and Recreation. So we are appointing Sabra Jewell as a non-resident to the Parks and Rec Board. And Leslie Lloyd had applied for the library position. We had another applicant for that who had a very compelling application, but he is a non-resident. He lives outside the city limits, and that board already has its one non-resident member. So we would ask to appoint Leslie Lloyd to that board tonight. So we actually have a total of 7 appointments to push forward to you. And I would welcome any questions or a nomination to approve those appointments.
I would move approval of the entire slate, Madam Mayor.
And I'd like to second that.
Thank you, Councilor Oberst, for the motion, and Councilor Lopez for the second, and Councilor Carey, question?
Just part of discussion, and I was making notes on other things, so I didn't get all of the accolades of the out of the non-residents applied. they're certainly welcome, but generally we've identified those as having a particular skill or a particular knowledge or ability that would sort of trip it over the top. So I guess it's permissive legislation to have someone from out of not a non-resident, but it is not a requirement. So I just would caution in future. I'm going to vote yes for this, but as we consider these in the future, that we need to look for some sort of a special and unique talent, and they may all have it.
And actually, these folks appear to be quite qualified for the positions they've applied for. I know on planning is extremely different. I mean, planning has very constrictive membership, either needs or requirements. So we do, that's one where if we have an out of town member of planning, you know, we make sure it's that there's somebody with definitely some expertise. So I appreciate that comment and a consideration. John and then Roxanne.
Just to follow on with that, Madam Mayor, the requirement in planning is that the one out-of-town member has to own property in the city. So we do have an out-of-town member on planning, and that member has lived in Monmouth, has been involved in Monmouth in so many ways for so many years. And while he does not live inside the city limits at this time, his heart lives here. I'm pretty sure. So, glad to have him on. And Madam Mayor, I will say that at one point, about 15 years ago, 10 years ago, we actually had every seat on every board and commission filled. And I'm looking forward eagerly to the day that we get there again, because as far as I know, that lasted about 2 months before we had a vacancy and never got all full again.
Thank you. And Councillor Belt.
I just wondered if we could encourage the person, well, I know he probably is aware of it, but encourage the person that won't be appointed to the library board about the Friends of Library, just because that'd be a great alternative for him.
I did that, Roxanne. I also suggested the Friends of the Senior Center.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Phyllis.
Partly because he also touts himself as a great grant writer. So we definitely want to connect him. But yeah, Phyllis worked through some of these folks and spoke to them about these constraints. So, and I will point out, thank you, Janet Chenard, that we do have one committee that is not allowed to have non-residents, and that is our budget committee. So we're full there, but that is by law something we cannot bring in other folks. So thank you for that, and I will call for the question. So all in favor of the slate, please signify by saying aye.
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 And any opposed? And Roxanne is frozen, so we'll assume that was an aye. So looks frozen to me. Oh, not to you. Okay. Thank you. So we will get those done, and we will bring back a recommendation for the opening on planning for you at our next meeting. So thanks for your patience. Marty Wine with our city manager's report.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I have a pretty short report tonight, and it consists in large part of things that you have already heard about tonight. So I just want to add to what's already been said and echo a shout out and acknowledgement and big thanks to our city staff who spent the entire weekend responding to the winter weather, AC, freezing conditions. You've heard it all, and thank you for the data, Madam Mayor. We're going to have a fuller report for you on Friday notes, but down power poles, lines, trees, welfare checks, social media messages, translations, announcements, taking phone calls, making sure our water and sewer systems were running properly and kept running, and generously making sure that our community got power and as quickly as possible. So you all know how unprecedented and disruptive this storm was for us, and not just from the electricity standpoint, but from connectivity standpoint. And it really showed how everyone in our community looks out for each other. And we're just really grateful to our tremendous staff for their amazing response. As you can see, as you drive around the city, it's not over, but at least it's above freezing. And the outpouring of support and thanks that we've gotten, we also, I think we have given back to the community over the last couple of days, and it was really great. So you'll see a fuller report in Friday Notes, and there's lots of after action discussion going on, as the mayor noted. And we do have an intention, because an emergency was declared at the state level. We declared a local emergency. The mayor did so yesterday, the 15th. And so our intention is that should this be a qualifying event for disaster relief funds at the federal, state, or local level, that we'll be requesting resources to help our response and our recovery. In light of that also, I know there have been questions about storm debris and cleanup efforts, and every community around us does something just a slightly little bit differently, but I just wanted to announce, and we'll start pushing this information out tomorrow, that beginning tomorrow, February 17th, Monmouth residents can drop off their wood debris. Those are logs or tree limbs or fencing or untreated material at Mar Brothers on Pacific Highway for no cost. So they had already reduced the fee for the by the yard drop off, but we know that as everybody's attention turns to cleaning up their properties, that we need to give folks a chance to be able to take that material somewhere. And so through the end of the month, Mar Brothers will be accepting Monmouth residents tree and debris and stuff from the storm. So I just want to let you know about that. City of Independence has also identified a drop-off site for tree limbs only at their sports complex on Deanne Drive. So there will be, lots of opportunities to get those tree limbs to somewhere they can get recycled. I think that's all I've got. The mayor mentioned the death investigation. The police department has spent the majority of the day working with, and there's not much to tell on that front. We were assisted by Polk County Major Crimes Team and Oregon State Police. There is no threat to the community, but it's an active investigation. And if we have further information, the Polk County District Attorney's Office will be putting that out. So that was some sad news for our community today. And that's all I've got for now. You'll get something more extensive in Friday Notes. It's been a busy weekend headed into a busy week, and I'd welcome your questions.
No, okay, no questions of Marty? Oh, Chris Lopez.
Yes, thank you, and thank you very much, Marty. I'm sure that this was a long weekend for you as well. I'm looking for a little bit more information about the debris removal. I know there's a number of different classes of debris, from the storm, whether it was fencing, whether it's, trees, and then also where that's fallen, whether it's fallen on private property or fallen into the street. The items that are currently in the street, are those is the onus on the homeowner to clear those if they're, if they're in front of parking spots, or how is that best handled?
Because we're a couple of days on from the storm, I know that folks may have already cleared things and put them in the street, but our public works crews' efforts are to have the streets clear, and they've done so. And if it is on a sidewalk or a planter strip or a street tree, it is the property owner's responsibility to clear that debris. I think what we're trying to do is provide an opportunity or an outlet for a place for that to go. But we don't have a debris removal program that looks like our leaf pickup program. And so so we are trying to, in that case, I'm appreciating your question, because we're asking that folks please not load debris into the street, because we are not going to be coming through as a city and picking it up, but we understand that it needs to go somewhere. So we're trying to ask the homeowners that they're responsible for the debris that falls on their property, and it's our responsibility as a city to keep the street clear.
Great, thank you very much for the clarity there.
Yeah, good question. I'm guessing we may be able to work with some volunteer groups who would help homeowners with that. I'm thinking particularly of some who away our Christmas trees each January, and maybe for a donation, they would also be glad to help folks with this. So that, and just folks driving through the community, once they know there's a spot, we'll
And
try
there
to
are
get
some-
folks connected.
Yeah,
with
there are some
help.
church groups. I was heartened to see also, as folks were asking about this on social media over the weekend, that there are several church groups who are volunteering to help folks who need help clearing debris.
Yes, Councilor Oberst.
My neighbor has a large oak tree with a number of branches broken and hanging in the crown. And this morning, a arborist from Central Point pulled up in front, cold called to say, we would love to take care of those branches for you. I made a joke this weekend that in the middle of the night on Friday night, the arborists were going, oh man, listen to all those trees. And so the arborists are going to be very busy in cleaning up the damage. And they are coming from outside of our area to get a little extra wintertime work and so on. I would urge, if a citizen is approached by any arborist, local or long distance, to verify with Contractors Board website that this person is in fact licensed, bonded, and insured, and currently in good standing with the CCB. I had a couple of little damaged things taken care of today, so just, you know, this is the kind of thing that brings people out to earn a little extra money. This is one area with people high in the air over your property that you might want to make sure that they are, in fact, know what they're doing and insured in case things go improper.
Great point. Wait.
Yeah, if I can just add, also, if they're going door to door soliciting work, they should be registered with the city as well. We don't
That's
license them, but we do register them.
We do have that requirement of folks doing door-to-door sales. So thank you, Lane, for that. All right, at this point, then we'll go ahead and take citizen comments. We don't have anyone here in the room with us, but Phyllis, do we have anyone who has indicated they have a public comment for us?
I have received nothing, Mayor Kuntz.
All right. I think at that point then we will move on. Again, we just have one item on our business. Oh, Carol?
Sorry, and my apologies, Madam Mayor. I'm not quite sure where to put a city councilor comment, and I wanted to say something about Black History Month. Is that here or at a later time?
Usually ask for those at the end of the regular meeting before we take our little break. So,
okay, thank you.
Our business agenda. And tonight we have only one item, and that is a first reading of an ordinance. I will just have Suzanne give us a brief reminder of the discussion we had at our last meeting and what step we are taking now to move this forward.
Okay, good evening. Thank you, Madam Mayor, and good evening, members of the City Council. As you'll recall, at your last February meeting, there was a public hearing to consider a comprehensive plan zone change for property just over an acre in size over at the S Curves and Ash Creek Station. They were asking to change the zoning and plan designation from multifamily residential to commercial retail to facilitate future commercial development that's part of the Ash Creek Station development. So at the end of that public hearing, the council did choose to approve the proposed amendment and directed staff to prepare an ordinance to adopt the change into our city zoning and plan maps. You have before you ordinance 1397 that has been prepared and brought back to you to make that decision official. This is just first reading tonight, and then we'll bring it back in the normal sequence at the next meeting for second reading. So that's all I have, unless there's any questions about that.
Thank you. Unless there was anything in that ordinance that didn't appear to align with what you thought you approved last meeting. Councilor Lopez.
I do not have anything out of line there, more a comment of thanks. It was noted that the little triangle, the little triangular tax lot there in the corner of the street has been added to the maps now, and that is much appreciated.
Yes, thank you for noticing that bit. That did come up. All right, with no other comments, I will read by title ordinance number 1397, an ordinance amending the Monmouth Comprehensive Plan Map designation for a certain parcel of real property located at 137 Monmouth Independence Highway, assessor map number 8430A, tax lot 3100, from medium density residential to commercial, and amending the Monmouth zoning map designation for said parcel from medium density residential to commercial retail. And I declare a first reading, and that will come back to us at our next meeting for second reading and adoption. Thank you. And so now we do have a few moments for council comments, and I am going to say, because we do have a couple of pretty long discussion items on our work session agenda, that I am going to postpone our executive session that was planned for this evening, the evaluation. Thank you all for completing that, but we will postpone that to our next meeting. And so, council comments. And Councilor McKeel, why don't you go ahead?
Okay, sorry. Let me just move a piece of document around here. So thank you, Madam Mayor and fellow councilors. I have to say I was remiss at the February 2nd City Council meeting to not mention Black History Month and apologize for dropping this. If anything, my lapse only makes it more painfully obvious how easy it is as a white person to forget about a community that is too often not heard at best and purposefully excluded at worst. Black History Month allows Americans an opportunity to recognize the progress made over the decades. For example, today, the U.S. Congress has 53 representatives and 3 senators who are Black, not to mention our first Black woman vice president. This was not the case 100 years ago. In the 1920s, there were no Black congressmen or senators, even though there were about 12 million Blacks in the United States living in highly segregated areas. This is particularly egregious when you realize that in 1920, in Mississippi and South Carolina, Blacks were about 52% of the population, and in Alabama, Georgia, and Louisiana, around 40% of the population was Black. So even though Blacks lived in segregated districts and were the largest population, none of them were in Congress. Our first impulse is to dismiss this gross lack of representation as the work of Jim Crow. But this dismissal stands in sharp contrast to the reason we fought the Revolutionary War. We fought a war because the colonists were denied representation in government. This type of double standard that white people have when we are confronted with concerns of the Black community. Many of us were taught in schools with textbooks that gloss over racist oppression of our past. But if we don't know our history, we will continue to struggle for justice. Germany knows this lesson. All their school children learn about the Holocaust. Across America, however, children are still given textbook assignments which ask them to evaluate the positive and negative aspects of slavery without discussing that a person cannot enslave another without using violence. In so many of our communities, we still subconsciously maintain the barriers established over our 400-year history that excludes people because of their skin color. Black History Month provides an opportunity to recognize the achievement of so many in spite of a system designed to exclude. It is a time to allow the invisible to become visible. Black history is also American history. When it's invisible, we don't know who we truly are as a country. Until the end of Black History Month, I hope we will learn more about our history and our notable fellow Americans. Of course, that's only about a week and a half away. We don't have to stop on February 28th. We can continue to read and learn. I hope Monmouth residents will continue to celebrate the spirit of Black History Month, because Black History Month is about learning who we are as an American community. We need to know about our racial history, as well as the achievements of our fellow brilliant Americans who are scientists, scholars, academics, and artists contributing to our American culture. And Madam Mayor, fellow councilors, I actually am very proud to commend the library staff and the director, Chris Obrist, for their work to promote Black History Month. They're going to help children and families with learning learning about Black History Month. The library is offering 2 virtual Black History Month story times on February 17th and February 24th at 4 p.m. You can get information about the Storytime link on the Monmouth Library website or the library's Facebook page, Monmouth Public Library. The library has some really good books in their collection, and they are posting this information on their Facebook page, as well as posting a list of related books on the library website. So I was really very, very excited that Director Obrist was so actively working for helping us understand more about Black history. And I just have one more short comment. I just wanted to also wish everyone a Happy New Year as we start the year of the ox. And so while the New Year is shared across Asian communities, I have a little bit of Chinese. It's a little rusty, but Xin Nian Kuai La. Happy New Year.
Thank you. And actually, I knew that. I last year was able to do a welcome to the group on campus who was holding Lunar New Year activities. So I actually, I believe that was correct, if I recall. Quick comment, Councilor Oberst, or are you just?
I wanted to thank our city manager for a wonderful job of communicating through this disaster that we faced this weekend, a small scale disaster on our case compared to some. My wife noted our presence on Nextdoor for the first time. And I think that reached out to a whole lot of people who may engage that form of social media and not others that we've used in the past. So I was thrilled to see us, pick up this new communication thread. I also wanted to thank Monmouth Power and Light for their efforts. We were amongst the 76 who were not restored to power on Saturday night because the whole neighborhood came on and then 2 fuses in our neighborhood blew. The good news is that one of the other houses was our Power and Light secretary just down the street from me. So there were 9 of us who had to wait for Sunday morning, but I called at 7 a.m. and they were out there at 7:05 and had us on by 7:15. So kudos to Chuck and his crews for their hard work. And I know Power and Light or Public Works was also knee deep in all of this this weekend. And thanks to everybody for the hard work on getting us through this.
Yep, absolutely. We are very lucky. I am going to ask for a motion to adjourn to work session.
So moved.
And all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Thank you. We going to take a little break. I'm sorry, our poor planning commission folks have been wading through all of this with us, and now I'm going to make them take a break. So if we could try to do 10 minutes, 8:17, between 8:17 and 8:20, if everyone's back, we will start up again. So thank you all very much. All right, thank you all for returning. When I was saying dang it, it was because Phyllis let me know she had some Girl Scout cookies in her office, and I was unfortunately saying I didn't have time to go get them. So that's why I let you all know that I was very disappointed here.
Madam Mayor, I believe you, if I may, I believe that we do not have video of you currently.
Yes, thank you. So I will like to, at this point, call to order our work session. And this evening, we had 2 items on our agenda. With the indulgence of my fellow counselors, I think we're going to try to limit it tonight and really focus on the code assistance joint work session with our planning commission members who joined us. We had planned time to go through our goal setting and council staff work plan separately anyway in the ensuing weeks. So I'm going to remove that from our agenda tonight and hopefully give us all a little bit better time to prepare and thoroughly discuss so that we can move on to this. So I am going to, at this point, turn our meeting over to our Community and Economic Development Director, Suzanne Duffner, and her staff, because she has staff and her staff is on the call. It's so exciting.
Yes. Thank you for that, Mayor. Yes, I would. Great, thank you. And I just would like to recognize Liz Pongrass is with us. She's our new associate planner. So I think this is the first time we've had a chance to introduce her to the City Council. Yeah, great. And I'll introduce our consultants as well for the project. But let me first give a little introduction here to our work session tonight. Thank you, Planning Commissioners, for joining us for this joint work session. Really excited to get into more of the details of our code update project that the city got a grant for this past summer through the state's Transportation Growth Management Program. We call that TGM for short. And I think Sarah will probably talk to you a little bit more about kind of the program objectives for that. But as the council may recall, we completed a housing needs analysis in 2019. And that analysis included a number of housing strategies that we as a city can take on to try to encourage the development of needed housing in our community to meet our 20-year housing needs. So several of those strategies dealt with getting into our zoning ordinance that has the codes and regulations surrounding housing development, and to get in there and to try to remove some of the barriers to being able to develop that needed housing and really streamline how development gets reviewed in the future. So very glad that we were able to get this grant funding to pay for the consultant's time and to undertake this project. It's a 2-phase project. So this first phase is all about doing the audit, the assessment, and coming up with an action plan that identifies the specific zoning code regulations that we want to target, since we fortunately can't rewrite them all, but we are developing through this action plan kind of the specifics of what we want to address, what those city priorities are. And I think you'll find that they line up pretty nicely with a lot of the council priorities from past goal setting sessions and also this most recent one. So you'll see some information in the table that the consultants provided that kind of guides you through how some of these code revisions can get at those larger policy objectives of that the council is trying to prioritize. So far, since this project started, we've had a couple of work sessions with the Planning Commission to kick off the project. We've had some stakeholder interviews with members of the community that are pretty familiar with their zoning ordinance and how it works and some of the challenges associated with it. So we've started some of that feedback process. We do also plan to get some more community engagement through a future community meeting that we're targeting in early March coming up here. So you'll notice that's one of the questions that we're asking for some feedback from the commission and the council on some questions to ask at that public community meeting. So we're in phase one. Phase two that follows this in the coming year will be to actually do the code revision work. So it's a longer process. So there's lots of time for good discussions and getting into more specifics. But tonight we really want Council and Planning Commission's feedback on some of what we're calling these kind of key policy issues or objectives. So with that, I'm going to turn the time over to our consultant, Sarah Breakstone, and I think she has a few slides to kind of guide some of the questions here tonight. Sarah's with OTAC, it's a planning consultant firm, and I think we're also joined by Stacy, who is with our TGM project coordinator with the state. So I think she may be still suffering from some of those power issues. I don't know if she's on the phone line with us, but yeah. So with that, Sarah, would you like to take it away?
Sure. Thanks, Suzanne. Good evening, everyone. Nice to be here. Glad to see you're all have power. We never lost power here in Northeast Portland. I think we got really lucky. So I'm going to share my screen. Let's see. Okay. Is everyone seeing that? Good. I always have to take a minute to figure out how to reconfigure my screen so that I can see everybody. Okay, well, I won't worry about that, but I will try. I can't see everybody right now, so if you're raising your hand, it's possible that I won't necessarily see you, so you might have to speak up. And in a second here, I'll see if I can fix it. I don't want to delay.
Sarah, I was able to drag down the bar right at the top of your shared screen on my screen, and all of a sudden I had everybody in teeny tiny little boxes above your screen. So I don't know if that works with you as the presenter, but it worked for me.
Well, oh boy, that wasn't it. View everyone. Okay. Oh, here we go. Great. Now I think I can see all of you. Thank you. So I'm Sarah Breakstone. I'm a senior planner and project manager with OTAC, and have been working with Suzanne and the Planning Commission and others at the city to evaluate your code and put together the draft action plan. And primary goal for this evening is really to talk about the draft action plan, but there's a lot of material there. Hopefully you've had a chance to at least skim through it, and you'll see that there's a lot of potential recommendations that are in that matrix. So we've tried to guide our conversation. We've identified some sort of key discussion items that are really centered around some of the higher level policy discussions that have been taking place at the city recently. So my slides are kind of organized around those policy objectives, similar to the memo that Suzanne provided with your packet for this meeting. Hopefully we'll have time to also get to just any other questions or comments that people have on the action plan that aren't covered in the slides that I'm going to go through. And we'll quickly talk about what our next steps are. Just quick time check. What do you usually try to wrap up by 9, or is it just kind of open-ended? Just so I have a sense of how quickly I need to move things along.
Yes, we do usually try to wrap up by 9 if that's possible. We know this
Okay.
is
Okay. Well, we'll see what we can do. I think for the planning commissioners, some of this is going to be familiar material. For city councilors, potentially some of this is new. So we'll just go through it and we'll see how far we get. So I think probably the first, and in my mind, one of the really key policy objectives that we're looking at are ways that we can update your zoning code to broaden the range of housing types that are available in Monmouth. So this is really about providing opportunities for more housing choices for Monmouth, excuse me, Monmouth residents. And the code amendments you'll see are really focused on what we call middle housing. And by middle housing, we mean duplex, triplex, fourplex, cottage cluster, row houses, or townhomes. It's really everything in between a single family detached home and a multifamily apartment building. It's those middle housing types where we're really focusing our energy, because those housing types tend to be smaller, more compact. They tend to be on smaller lots, and they tend to provide better opportunities for affordable housing and for more home ownership. So that's where our recommendations are focused. We're really looking at opening up all 3 of your residential zones, low, medium, high density zones, to allowing more of these types of housing. Some of these housing types are allowed in your code now. There's just those gaps and some sort of terminology, I think, that we would recommend sort of cleaning up. So you'll see, for example, we would recommend that you allow cottage clusters in your low density zone. That's something that's not allowed now. You'll see that recommendation in the draft action plan. Along with that, we've recommended some adjustments to your development standards. So these are your sort of dimensional development standards, setbacks, lot widths, lot areas, those types of things that really go along with enabling some of these middle housing types. It's not enough to just say it's allowed. You also need to have development standards that support and enable those housing types. For example, if you want to allow townhomes in your medium density residential zone, for example, you really need to have lot area and lot width standards that support townhomes. So you can't have a lot width of 40 or 50 feet for a townhome. It just doesn't, it doesn't work. No one is going to come in and build a 50-foot wide row of, a row of 50-foot wide townhomes. So we're going to, we looked at a lot of your development standards, made some recommendations there. Along with that, another way to increase opportunities for more housing is to increase your densities. You can do it across all your zones. You can do it just in your high density zone. And there are a couple of different ways to do it. You can increase your maximum density standards, which you have for each of your residential zones, which also means updating your comprehensive plan so that they're consistent. Another option is to change the way or establish a new way for dealing with density specific to those middle housing types. For example, you can add language in your code that says you are not going to apply your density maximums to those middle housing types. So for cities in Oregon that are subject to the House Bill 2001 rules, House Bill 2001 is the middle housing bill that was passed last year. Monmouth is not subject to it because you don't quite have 10,000 people. But cities that are subject to it, and they have to implement middle housing in their zones as well, they are required to not apply density maximums to the middle housing types. That's part of the rules that were adopted. Again, Monmouth is not subject to those rules, but that is an approach that you could consider if you wanted to. It's kind of like a de facto density bonus for those types of housing. Another item that's on here that is not actually part of the draft action plan, but I've understood from city staff to be something that we may want to consider and could add to the action plan, and that is to provide incentives for affordable housing development. My assumption here is that this would be more like regulated affordable housing that is affordable to people who are meeting, one of those affordability thresholds, like 60% of the area median income, or however that is determined. I've seen this done in a few cities where if you are willing to provide affordable housing as part of a project, then there are certain incentives or bonuses that are available to that project, a height bonus, a density bonus. There's a few others that we could explore as well. So I've got some slides that just kind of and these are probably going to look pretty familiar to the Planning Commission. But I thought it would be helpful to just kind of run through some quick slides that look at some of these housing types that we're talking about in a little bit more detail to help you understand what we mean. This is a slide of row houses, different row house projects throughout Oregon. One's in Mosier, Fairview. I think this one down here is at Orenco Station. These lot sizes vary anywhere from just under 1,000 square feet to up to 2,000 square feet, and the densities vary from about 22 units per acre all the way up to 44 units per acre. So a pretty wide range, but something to keep in mind, your high density residential zone currently has a maximum density of 20 units per acre. So these projects wouldn't fly in your current under your current zoning, I guess is what I'm trying to say. These are narrow lot developments. They're not technically a middle housing type because they are detached homes, but they are a really interesting way to promote and support compact forms of housing that can reach pretty high densities and be more affordable because they are smaller and they're on small lots. So again, with these, you're hitting densities anywhere between just over 20 units per acre all the way up to 34, depending on the lot sizes. These are some slides of cottage clusters. When we talk about a cottage cluster, there's a few parameters that are important. Typically, in order to be considered a cottage cluster, there need to be at least 4 units on the lot or in the project. Units are typically have a footprint of no greater than 900 square feet. So they're fairly small units, and they are intended to be clustered around an open courtyard or a shared open space. They don't necessarily front on the street, the public street. Parking is typically some kind of shared parking arrangement that is located behind the units or off to the side. And a lot of times the access to these can be through a trail or, you'll have the units that are fronting on this open space rather than facing out to the street. So cottage clusters are great because they have this nice feel and this nice character. They can feel kind of low density and similar. They fit nicely in, I think, with what I'm trying to say is they fit nicely in an existing neighborhood of single family detached homes because they have a similar character, but they also can come at pretty significant densities. So a couple projects here are right around 15 or 16 units per acre. They can go up and down from there depending. And here's some plexes, and by plexes we're talking duplex, triplex, fourplex. Again, lots of different examples, lots of different ways that plexes can be configured. They can be side by side, they can be stacked. You can have a cluster of duplexes. This project up in the corner is one in Salem, Mount Angel. It's a cluster of, I think, 7 duplexes and hits a density of about 17 units per acre. This, if you can see my cursor, this project in Salem is a triplex. Fairly small units, 750 square feet up to 1,250 square feet, but hits a density of 30 units per acre. Oops, sorry, I went too far. Backing up. So are there questions about the housing stuff, the housing sort of policy direction that we're recommending? Thoughts or concerns about some of these housing types or the development standards?
I have a question. Mine's kind of a combination of a question and a comment, but when you talk about the cottage clusters, would that be similar to the cottages that are located off of Western Oregon University, off of one of the parking lots it's across from like Landers Hall and it's tucked away. Would that be an example?
I'm not sure I know that project.
Okay, I don't know if anyone knows what I'm talking about. They're kind of hidden, but it's a really nice I think, an example of what you're talking about.
Mayor,
And-
who's in the cottage cluster? If you know where our mayor lives, she lives in a cottage cluster in Edwards Addition. That's a classic example right there.
Yeah, and there's a cottage cluster right around the corner from you, Rebecca, on Gwen.
Yes, yes, that one too.
Or am I unmuted? The Western Oregon townhouses, Arbor Park are townhouse units, so they are density housing, but not a cottage cluster, because as it showed there, we have several cottage clusters in the Edwards Addition neighborhood, including the one I live in and the one that was pictured, which is my mother's house. So.
Oh, that's right. I forgot that one of these projects is right
Yeah,
there
no, thank you.
on Queen Street.
That's my mother's home, yes.
It looks lovely. Great.
Sarah, I have a question. John Kerry from the council. You noted that this type of, especially the increase in density and so on, and the middle housing types, which seem to work in increased density areas, are typically more affordable housing. The pictures and the examples that you had didn't exactly spring out and scream affordable as we looked at them. I realize it's exterior, but what is it about that would lend itself to affordable housing?
It's because they require less land and they're typically smaller units. So if you have less land, you're paying less in land costs when you're trying to purchase. And if it's a smaller unit, it potentially has a reduced price. It's entirely possible for middle housing types to not necessarily hit affordability targets. But the idea here is that, you know, what you can do with your zoning code is open things up and provide opportunity for development to occur. And if you really want to push the affordability piece, then there really need to be some partner programs that go along with it. Because otherwise you are just sort of relying on developers to come in and do projects that result in affordable homes. And to some degree, the market is dictating that right now. People are looking for smaller lot homes that they can afford. But if you're really trying to hit, you know, a certain affordability level or threshold, you often need to have sort of additional programs and policies in place to get that full package. This is more about opportunity and options for development.
So it would be market driven ultimately.
Yeah, unless there were programs that, you know, like if you had an incentive program specifically for regulated affordable housing, that is something that could be part of your code. And then obviously there's other programs outside of your zoning code that could be in place as well. But yeah.
And as you've described, and with the increased density and all that goes with that, are those typically attractive to low-income families? I mean, I just don't know that. I guess that would be my question.
I think they're attractive to a lot of different types of households. I think they're attractive to single people. I think they're attractive to new families who are potentially first-time home buyers and need something that is smaller and more affordable to them. I think they can be attractive to retired people who are downsizing and don't want a big yard to take care of. So I mean, I think the market for this type of housing is broad. It has a lot of possibilities. Other thoughts or questions?
Yeah, this isn't specific to middle housing types, but I know one of the ideas that was discussed in planning with you in the past was the idea of having, or there was people expressed on the commission the fact that there is demand for single bedroom units, but nobody's building them. One of the ideas that was floated was having a density bonus for high density residential for single units where they wouldn't support their density. I didn't see that in the action plan. I was wondering if that was something that's going to happen to be a suggestion later in the process, or if there was a reason not to include it.
I remember that conversation. If it's not in the action plan, that may have just been oversight on my part, because I definitely remember that conversation and remember making that recommendation. So I will make a note to look for that and get it back in there.
Sure.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
Possible I missed it.
Councilor McKeel?
Yeah, please excuse my ignorance. I've been trying to find what is the definition of high density and medium density. And I found it on internet, but I thought I better ask the expert. So for high density, how many houses per acre, and medium density? Thank you.
Sure. So in Monmouth, well, let's just do all the zones. Your low density residential zone has a maximum density of, right now, 5 units per acre. Your medium density has a max density of 12 units per acre, and your high density has a maximum of 20 units per acre.
Thank you, because that's not what Wikipedia said. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
You can't trust Wikipedia.
No, not at all.
Councilor, oh.
But,
Go ahead.
on this topic, if I may, not a question, but I would be remiss if we didn't point out that we do currently utilize and have a mixed density as well within town. So, you know, good point out for our newer members that is in existence and is often overlooked in these discussions.
It's true. Thank you. Councilor Oberst, did you have a comment?
I just wanted to say, Carol, the standards differ in every jurisdiction, so Wikipedia wouldn't know anything about us. And I was just wondering, for purposes of comparison, just so council can have a notion, what would be, say, the high density maximum in Portland or a Portland suburb? What kind of low density maximums do we see in, say, and maybe Marty knows this, Tigard? You know, just so we can get an idea of how we compare with the larger city, and even just, you know, say Independence or Salem.
So I know that in Portland, you know, for a while now, the city of Portland has really been trying to implement more density in the residential zones. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but in a sort of urban neighborhood in Portland, densities can get pretty steep, pretty high, upwards of 30 units per acre, depending on where you are and what kind of housing you're building. And then in you know, in places like the Pearl or South Waterfront, I mean, you know, they just go up from there. They can get pretty high because that's where you have some of the really tall buildings, or some of the like the stacked apartments or the stacked condos. I don't really know. I mean, Portland has basically moved away from having a low density zone. You know, they've, in most of their zones, you know, these housing types are allowed, and densities are pretty flexible. I mean, you can build most types of projects in most neighborhoods in Portland at this point. And I know Tigard, and Marty was there, I think, when this happened, has also implemented some of these middle housing types in their residential zones. I don't know if you have had in Tigard density maximums in your residential zones there? I'm not
Actually,
sure.
Sarah, I think you know Tigard as well as I know Tigard, but the high density zones in Tigard they're 25 and 40 units per acre. But you're right that the missing middle requirements from HB 2001 make it more like the situation you just described, which is there are going to be increasingly different types of housing in every, in every zone. So, but there were not that many developments that were there yet that had those, that density.
And John, this is Lane. If you want to look just down the road in Dallas, the residential, the low density is 4 to 7. The medium is 6 to 12, and the high density is 10 and can go up to 40 in some circumstances.
And that was where?
Dallas.
Oh, okay. Thanks. Other comments or questions?
John Kerry here again. Just a question. You referred a couple times to Monmouth not being subject to HB 2001. What is the threshold on that? 10,000?
So yeah, there's two thresholds. The first one is 10,000, and that's so cities between 10,000 and 25,000. They're called medium cities, and they are basically required to allow duplexes everywhere where you would allow a single family detached. If you're 25,000 or more, or you're in a metropolitan region, then you are required to implement all of these middle housing types in any zone that also allows a single family home.
And when is that 10,000 to 25,000 number pegged? Is that something you can work into, or are you grandfathered or grandpersoned away as passage? Because I'm afraid that we're there. I think we're inside of that. I've seen different numbers, and somebody that's smarter than I am would be able to identify that. But once our most recent census is done, I think we're probably going to see we're going to be over 10.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess my point is, you might as well.
Right. Yeah, you're close. And I don't know exactly how that works. The state released a list of cities that have to comply with House Bill 2001 when they were going through adopting the rules. Monmouth's not on the list, but in terms of cities that were just right under the threshold that are like Monmouth going to be probably hitting 10,000 or more, I don't know exactly when the flip gets switched and the state decides that you have to now comply with House Bill 2001. That's a good question. I don't fully understand the process there. But it's true, you're close, and once Monmouth gets there, then that duplex requirement becomes the requirement. Let's see, I think Commissioner Howard, you had your hand up for a while.
Yeah, and actually I was thinking on the same topic was even if we don't yet meet that threshold, we will soon. And this is an excellent opportunity for us to not have to shoehorn it in later. We take the time to do it right now. And that's my only comment.
And Councillor Oberst?
So if we're not at 10,000, and I do wonder about with COVID and students from Western not being here all of 2020, we may actually see a little regression in our number. Who knows? But I'm wondering if the PSU estimates don't rule at the end of the day. And when PSU says, we think you have over 10,000 people, then as far as the state's concerned, you have over 10,000 people. And so regardless, we are so close, let's just do it.
Anything else on this topic? Housing?
I can't, and this is Blaine Shutter, I'm city attorney. I just brought up House Bill 2001. It looks to me like it's a moving threshold. So as the city grows into 10,000, it would become subject to the medium city requirements.
So it just sort of automatically becomes a requirement?
If you move into that population group, then it applies.
Okay.
Plus, both signs coming into Monmouth say 10,232.
I think one other thing that's interesting about this, absolutely, I think, no need to go through this again. We've just annexed more property into town. We have more development coming. But also, as a city, we have some pretty varied housing types. I mean, obviously with the larger rental market and the mixed density development that we have. We all know people don't like density, and these changes, as we discuss them, I think are going to get sort of some of the usual pushback. But I think we've already integrated a lot of that pretty successfully in town. So yeah, I'm all in favor of making this as flexible as we can to support the future housing we need.
Great. All right. I'm going to hit the next slide, which is also about housing. So right now your code has some minimal standards that apply to new housing. It mostly applies in that mixed use, I can't remember, the mixed density zone. I think it's called your MX zone. But what you don't have are design standards for example, a new duplex or even a new single family detached home. There aren't design standards that apply in Monmouth now. And with the addition of some of these additional housing types, the question is, would Monmouth maybe like to see some design standards that would apply to all new housing? So it would apply to single family detached homes, it would apply to row houses, it would apply to cottage clusters, triplex, you name it. These would be clear and objective standards. So there wouldn't be discretion involved in understanding or interpreting the standards. A project would either meet the standard or not meet the standard. And the intent there is that these could be approved through a city staff review, and these would not be the types of projects that would be going in front of your planning commission through design review. And the standards would be fairly simple. Things like you need to have a front entrance facing the street. It would have a little bit to do with setbacks. There would be standards in place to make sure that the garage isn't sort of dominating the front facing facade. There would be some standards for some simple architectural features to provide a little articulation on the front of homes. All of these things intended to ensure that new housing has a certain level of aesthetic quality to it and can be compatible in an existing neighborhood with existing homes in it, and is providing sort of that walkability aspect to your neighborhoods. So this would be a new section in your code with standards, and there would probably be a set of standards that would apply across the board, and then there would need to be some specific standards that would apply to, for example, townhomes have kind of a specific, they would have specific requirements. Cottage cluster would have some specific requirements because those are kind of unique types of development. Are there thoughts about this approach or questions or concerns? Commissioner Howard?
Yeah, I just want to point out to council, because they haven't heard this before from when we talked about it in meetings. It's been interesting talking about density, both with this project and with housing needs analysis, and people's concerns over density. And presentations always have really attractive examples of dense housing. But going back to the comment about design standards where the garage doesn't dominate, both this and the housing needs analysis presentations, none of the photos had garages in them. And that seems to be
Not in
a
the front
key.
anyway.
Not in the front, exactly. That seems to be one of the key things for making density more acceptable and more attractive. So keep that in mind when we're talking about adopting design standards.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Councilor Salinas Oliveros here. Would this include sidewalks, trees, kind of that front look to the housing?
No, these would be design standards for the buildings themselves. The sidewalks and street tree standards live elsewhere.
John would
Thank
like
you.
them all made with brick, right, John?
Sorry?
John wants them all made with bricks.
Bricks are charming. One thing to keep in mind is that there's always a balance when you're looking at design standards for housing and for commercial, you know, but between requiring certain things that contribute to the aesthetic, but not going overboard and creating barriers to development because what you're requiring is going to cost so much money to build that people aren't going to be interested in doing it. So that's the balance we're always keeping in the back of our heads when we're looking at new design standards. Councilor Lopez?
Yes, thank you, Sarah. And my question was actually timely to your comment there. When one thinks of design standards and one thinks of affordability, those two tend to fall in two very different conversations. And so what strategies would you recommend to us that would allow us to have those design standards and still achieve that target of real affordability?
That's a good question. Yeah. In terms of code strategies, because that's where I'm focused, what you can do is make sure that your design standards are basic, clear, objective. You can also make sure that a project doesn't need to go through a lengthy discretionary review process like a planning commission hearing. So you can streamline the process, which saves money. And you can also make sure that your standards are pretty easy to interpret and implement. I mean, some of the things that we're talking about are, you know, a certain percentage of windows on the front, having maybe a covered front porch. So there are things that add cost potentially, but I think that there are ways to offset some of those costs with your processing. And like I said earlier, if you're really trying to hit specific affordability targets, then you probably need to have additional programs that are in place along with some zoning amendments. Councilor Carey?
I think personally residential design standards are a good idea. They can't be set too high, but I think they're a good idea. But your slide suggests that those residential design standards would create a more walkable neighborhood. I'm struggling to find the link there.
The link has to do really with how buildings face and address the street and the sidewalk in front of them. So more walkable neighborhoods are those that are sort of more similar to an older traditional single family neighborhood where there are front porches facing the sidewalk. Houses tend to be a little bit closer to the sidewalk. They're not set back 40 feet. You don't have a lot of garage blank walls facing the sidewalk. So it's really about providing visual interest in the neighborhoods for people that are walking by. It's not necessarily, I mean, obviously sidewalks and street trees are a big part of that. As I said, that's a different part of the code, but this is really about creating an aesthetic that feels comfortable to pedestrians and feels scaled toward them and feels kind of open and transparent for them.
Thank you. That makes sense.
Commissioner Lowry? Oh, sorry, is it commissioner or counselor?
Commissioner. How do you arrive at these standards? Do you do it by committee? It seemed to me like if you did it by committee, you'd never get very much agreement.
There are some models out there that are available. We usually start with one of those. I've done this kind of work in quite a few small towns in Oregon, and so typically I kind of keep track of what's worked in other places and pull from that. So we're never trying to recreate the wheel here. We want to pull from standards that we know have worked well in other places. The TGM program also developed a model code for small cities that has design standards in it, along with some pretty good graphics that depict visually what those design standards are meant to achieve. So we pull from those resources, and then there are usually some pretty lengthy discussions with a code committee or planning commission, city council, and things get tweaked and added and removed from there. So it's a process, and that would all come in the second phase of the project when we're actually developing the adoption ready code amendments. That's when we would be looking at the detailed design standards, and I'm guessing we would have some sort of committee that would be guiding us through that work.
I'm going to take just a second. Is everyone okay if we continue to 9:30? We do have a few more areas here, and I think Sarah needs a little bit of feedback from us as to what the next steps of getting community input are. So I'd really like to try to continue.
Okay, yeah, let me, I think if we want to do that, might need to skip a couple of my slides. So let's go to this one, because this is kind of one of the bigger ones having to do with economic development and what can we do in your code to support economic growth and development. And again, there's kind of a lot of recommendations in the draft action plan that get at this. One of those is similar to what we were just talking about in terms of the residential design standards. Streamlining your design review approval process for projects that can meet clear and objective criteria or clear and objective standards. This is particularly important for housing, but could also be done for some commercial projects or industrial projects, so that if you have clear and objective standards, there is no interpretation needed, which means your planning commission doesn't really need to look at these projects, so they can go through a shorter review process that costs them less time and less money. So that's something that we've looked at. There's standard in your code now that requires a permit for home occupations that and I don't think there's a distinction between whether or not they have on-site customers or no customers. Recommendation here, and this came from a staff comment, is if a home occupation does not have on-site customer visits, they would not be required to go through the application and pay that $250 fee. One of the things we talked about with the Planning Commission, and there was some support or maybe curiosity about moving it forward and seeing what the next step would look like, would be to allow some small neighborhood scale commercial retail uses in your medium and high density zones. Those types of uses are not allowed in those zones now. We would be looking really at a very limited list of uses. They would be like retail, maybe eateries, restaurants, bars, maybe some personal service uses, maybe some very small sort of shared office type uses. It would also come with some restrictions on size. So these businesses that we're going to be locating in your residential zones would have some size restrictions, maybe 5,000 square feet, maybe even smaller. That's completely up to the city to decide where they want to put those thresholds. There would potentially be some parking considerations with those uses. But the idea there is to, again, it's kind of looking at these walkable communities, right? So providing some opportunities for residents to walk to some commercial services in their own neighborhoods, providing opportunities for small businesses. That's the idea there. Excuse me. Along similar lines, there's been a lot of discussions about food carts and food cart pods in Monmouth. There seems to be some support for them. Currently, you don't really have a lot in terms, you don't have anything in your zoning code that regulates food cart pods. So the thought there is to potentially develop some zoning regulations for food carts and cart pods so that they could be sort of formally allowed as a use, but also regulated a little bit more closely by the city to make sure that they are maintaining an aesthetic standard, a safety standard, those kinds of things. And lastly, we've talked about the fact that you have, I want to say 5 commercial zones and 3 industrial zones in Monmouth, and there appears to be quite a bit of overlap between the commercial zones or some of the commercial zones in terms of the types of uses that are allowed there and the standards that are in place. There may be opportunities to consolidate and streamline your commercial zones and your industrial zones. You also have really long, detailed permitted use lists in those zones. And there have been sort of questions and confusions in the past about trying to determine what use can be allowed in one of those zones. And there's a lot of interpretation that needs to take place. And I think that's how zone permitted use lists get that way in the first place, is they kind of get added to in a piecemeal basis, like, oh, well, what about this really specific use? We need to make sure that's allowed. An opportunity would be to go to more of like a use category approach, which is a much shorter list of categories that are very well defined. There are examples for each category. There are exclusions. So if there's something that you absolutely don't want permitted as part of that category, you get those in there too. And then there's a very clear pathway for a simple staff interpretation if somebody has a question about what category their use fits into. This sort of approach is used in quite a few cities in Oregon, and it seems to save a lot of time on the front end and for applicants and city staff, just in terms of determining what's allowed and what's not allowed. So again, a lot of this is sort of streamlining, which all gets at that sort of, let's allow economic growth and development and not create unnecessary barriers or unnecessary process. Thoughts about any of these? I know that was kind of a mouthful, all for one slide. Questions?
Yeah, I have one comment. It's because we are working with an economic development advisory group right now. And it's funny because we are talking about what is the future of economic development. You know, we don't need to recreate past successes. And so I really like this shout out to the small scale commercial uses and broadening the ability of those, because we've talked about things like, right, work from home and co-work spaces and you know, internet pods being sort of a really great opportunity for us. So though, you know, if you have other great ideas about those kinds of things that maybe aren't in use now, but really would push us forward or prepare us for the way people are going to live, work in the coming years, I think those would be great additions.
Great. Councilor Oberst?
I'd like to just put in a word for the consolidation of industrial and commercial zones, and especially the elimination of lists on which you may leave something out that you really want, or you may forget to put something on that you really don't. And so, you know, if we can narrow that down, I don't know how many counselors have ever looked at our industrial zones, but they are a nightmare. And this is one I really think we ought to go after. I would also be in favor of some more stringent standards around the food cart industry to try to make them more attractive, safer, you know, a place to wash your hands, things like that. So.
Sure. Others? Okay, I'm going to move on. Let me see. I do want to get to this last question, and since we've only got 15 minutes, I think maybe I'm going to skip to that one. One of our next steps is going to be a community meeting. Because of the need to do everything virtually, what we're thinking about doing is bring a live meeting, and I would be doing a presentation, probably similar to what we're talking about here, trying to kind of keep things at a higher policy level, keep it understandable, and get some feedback from people. At the same time, I think we're also going to launch some kind of online survey to just capture people who don't want to come to a community meeting, and the survey will be up and running for a couple of weeks, and then we'll be able to pull the feedback that we get from the survey. So I guess one of the things that would be helpful to hear from this group is there feedback that you would like to hear from your citizens? Are there questions specifically that you would like us to ask, or topics? Are you interested in hearing what people think about these housing types? Kind of anything like that. I know Councilor Salinas Oliveros, sorry, provided some questions earlier. That was really helpful. But are there thoughts about that? What would you like to hear from people in Monmouth while we're developing this next step? I would be, Councilor Oberst.
If you can get into a discussion about Main Street design standards, I would find that personally valuable. Main Street's near and dear to my heart, the Main Street program as well. And
yeah.
I feel like at this point we have some pretty watery standards that I can't speak for Suzanne, but I have a feeling that what we have is hard to apply and may not really be what the citizens and or the Planning Commission, who are of course all citizens as well, would think about downtown development. And I'd like to get a clearer picture of when people envision a redeveloped Main Street, what does it look like?
And that, yeah, that's a great question. And that's something that we've talked about at the Planning Commission work sessions is, you know, you do have some design guidelines in your Main Street district now. But it sounds like what's happening is the Planning Commission doesn't feel like they have quite the right leverage to require projects that are they're not quite getting there. So there's within your code there's still the ability to build a project that might not be to the city's aesthetic desires, I guess. So yeah, that's a good question, and I think that we can find ways and use a lot of visuals, like almost do kind of a visual preference survey, like do you like this building or this building? And yeah, there are ways we can do that. So yeah, that's good feedback. Thank you.
Yes, I have
oh yes, go ahead.
I have a comment for you. So I think what might happen, there's going to be different interpretation of what affordable housing is and means. Yeah. And it would be, it's going to be important to find out what our community thinks that is. And, you know, depending on different income levels and situations, that's going to be important. And then explaining what you're trying to do will be important as well. The other thing I would recommend at this community meeting or public meeting that you're having, Are you going to have interpreters? Are you going to have it closed caption, sign language interpreters? Are you going to have the survey in Spanish? Like, how big of a cross section of the population are you going to be reaching or searching for when you're looking for this type of feedback?
That's a great question. Suzanne and I haven't quite gotten into that level of detail yet. We've just recently started to think about what this community meeting could look like. My hope and my preference is that we would have simultaneous interpretation during the live portion and a translated version of the survey. That's not kind of within the scope of my work. So I'll need to work with Suzanne and others at the city to understand what the possibilities are there. I don't know if Suzanne, if you can speak to that now, or if that's something we need to talk about later.
Yeah, I think we'll have to give some thought to that. Usually the minimum, like our council meetings, it's offered that if folks need accommodations to please contact us beforehand so we can make those arrangements. We will definitely have the survey translated into Spanish for folks to be able to have that in both English and Spanish versions. So real good feedback, and we will broadcast the invitation widely. It's meant for the whole community, so we'll get out something in our community notes and our social media channels and our website. So then just hopefully you can help us spread the word through your networks as well. I have a list of stakeholders and interested parties, people that have just over time expressed interest in this project, and so we'll definitely target them as well to take notice of that.
Thank you. Let's see, I see a comment. Did Commissioner Cable, did you have a comment?
No, you kind of answered my question.
Okay.
Thank you.
I see. Oh, yep, I see you.
I'm curious as to the interest in the landowners or landlords or whatever you might want to call them. Are they included in the vision of the city that they own property in? Because you can have a lot of interest in how you want your town to be and what it looks like, but if the landlord is not engaged or doesn't have some kind of criteria where he can just leave it empty for years on end and doesn't seem to care, I don't know how you develop your town.
Well, we don't have like a stakeholder group that is comprised of property owners or landlords at this point. Our outreach has been some targeted stakeholder interviews and work sessions. So hopefully the community meeting will generate some interest among property owners and landlords. And I also think as we are moving into phase 2, where we're actually developing standards and criteria and code language, typically when I do that kind of work, I like to work with the code committee. That's kind of a technical advisory committee. And I think that would also be an opportunity to pull in some developers, some landowners, some landlords to get that broader perspective then. But we haven't specifically targeted those people yet as far as this project goes in this phase.
Donna Cable.
Oh, yes.
I do have a question kind of along that same line. Are we past the point where a part of the survey would relate to what we would like our town to look like? Everything we have talked about tonight has to do with downsizing and not wanting a yard to take care of and that sort of thing. We happen to be in the real estate business, and it seems to me like there's a big market for single-family homes, and it seems to me like we're pushing that away from our plan and talking about getting smaller and more dense, where in the real estate industry in this area, I mean, there are people that are waiting for houses, for single family homes. And when you look at how a single family developments, how quickly, I mean, the homes are sold in the before they're built. It seems to me like we're not taking that into account. Am I wrong? And did the survey have any questions that address that?
So two things. We're not precluding at all single family detached development, and nothing that we would, none of the changes that we recommend are reducing or limiting the opportunities for single family detached homes. But what we are doing is opening up opportunities for other housing types that don't exist now, so that developers who do want to do something other than a single family detached development have that option, and so that residents who want to buy something other than a detached home on its own lot have that option. So it's really about flexibility and providing opportunity, and giving a broader variety of choices for things that could happen in Monmouth. But it's certainly not about precluding single detached homes on their own lots. It's just about adding others. And then the second part, so I think the online survey will definitely have some questions in there about housing and what kinds of housing people would like to see, what kind of housing they think is missing from Monmouth now. So I think that we could ask some questions about housing, and I think we should, because people always.
It just seems like we're talking beyond that point at this time.
Well, I think a lot of this is still up for discussion, right? I mean, we're very early in the sort of exploring phase, so I think it's important to hear from your community about the housing types that they would like to see, because that, depending on the feedback that we get and the feedback that we continue to get from commission and city council, that changes the direction that we take as we move forward.
Right. Okay, I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Let's see. I know that Councillor Carey was waving his hand quite a while ago.
I was, but happy to defer to Donna. She's my neighbor, and whatever Donna says, I'm with. So just a couple things. One, regarding the outreach, and Suzanne, as you work with that, that is one of our goals, as you all know, to enhance our outreach to various communities. This is going to be a challenging one because there's a lot of technical stuff. This stuff flows off Sarah's tongue very easily, but in many ways, to many of us, it sounds like she's talking in tongues. So
oh no,
we'll need to make sure that our interpreters, signers, whatever it might be, are ready, because there's a lot of nuance and a lot of detail. I think you're going to hear, and we're going to hear, a fair amount of feedback regarding downtown development and the parking requirements of large-scale residential developments down there. The new development we have going in, I believe, if memory serves, it's required. It's got 27 units. It's required to have 27 parking spaces, 10 of which perhaps are located on city streets. And whether that's exactly right or not, there's going to be a fair amount of parking in the neighborhoods as a result. So while the intent is to you know, make a more walkable community, et cetera, which is all good. In reality, that may or may not land. And I think, and a little bit to Donna's point, I think we have to be cognizant, and I don't sound like a real hayseed when I say this, but we've got to be a little bit careful that we don't apply urban solutions to rural circumstances. There's a lot of things in you know, an urban setting where there's a lot of, you know, you don't need a vehicle because you're on the max line and you're one link away from the streetcar. And, you know, so you don't have that. You know, we're quite a ways away from a lot of places here in Monmouth. So we're not going to get all of that. Now, that's not to say we don't work towards some of it, but I think we've got to be wise in how we move in those directions. And that speaks a little bit to the density and some of those sorts of things.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a point well made. And those are certainly the things that rise to the top when we've done this kind of work in other communities. Parking is always a big issue. Density is always a big issue. So yeah, we expect that those conversations will be ongoing. Let's see, Councillor Oberst.
I'm going to take a guess that one of the hard nuts is going to be talking to folks about the idea that if we allow cottage clusters and single family, that's not just new development. That's talking about somebody could come into an existing neighborhood, knock down a house and replace it with 4 houses.
Mm-hmm.
And unless we have some way to craft ordinance that says this only applies to new development, and I think that'd be a tough one. And I'm not sure that certainly for duplexes, the state would buy it. So, you know, talking to folks about cottage clusters is great, but it's important that we have people understand that, you know, what we're really talking about here. And so, your presentation, one of the questions is, are you comfortable with that notion that, you know, somebody could come in and put a accessory dwelling unit or a duplex anywhere in any single family residential area? And make sure that folks are aware that that's what we're talking about. I take no position on that. I just want to make sure that the citizens of this community know this. And the other piece is this is a really critical piece of outreach for city government. I've been involved in a project around statewide land use and voices unheard. And one of the things that my group has come to the conclusion of is that people want to get involved at the last minute when the decision is being made whether to allow that thing down the street to be built. And what they really needed to do was get in on the ground floor when the code was being written that said that thing is allowed or not. Yep. And so I feel like this could be sort of a first go at let's really make a push on outreach and try to get people in to get engaged in this piece. And with that, Madam Mayor, I will stop.
No, it wasn't about that. I just had one comment and then kind of get another sense of time since we're at 9:30. I think, Sarah, what I mentioned before, we have a lot of these housing types in Monmouth. So I think what is helpful if we're showing townhouses or we're showing duplexes that already exist, if those photos show pictures of what we already have in town,
mm-hmm.
That's way different than showing what's in Wilsonville, because nobody wants Monmouth to look like Wilsonville.
Sure.
So Mount Angel is awesome because, you know, so that's what I would love as we're going forward and coming up with examples. And I'm sure we will be glad to give people tours of cottage clusters and things like that they can see what those things look like. You know, if there's a video of what it really looks like. And we have them here in town. So that's my comment about how we engage the public and come back. I'm thinking probably this discussion is really percolating a lot of things for many of us. What would be a window in which we could give more feedback like this on a survey particularly?
I'm sorry, so
Do you have a time that we want to try and develop this? Because if we all get a bunch of questions flying at you or Suzanne in the next week or so.
we hadn't landed on a precise date. The community meeting itself, the live portion, the live event, we have tentatively scheduled that for, there's your zoning, March 11th. The survey, I was looking at maybe running it like March 8th through the 22nd. We may need to push that out a little bit because I want to make sure that it's really well developed, and translation usually takes time. And if we're trying to pull in images from Monmouth, which I think is a great idea, that takes time. I might have to recruit some local photographers. So that I can see that getting maybe pushed a little bit out. I think the community meeting we can do on March 11th, and maybe we kind of use that as the launch to the online survey and let people know that that's going to be happening the following week or something. So I think Suzanne and I can talk about that a little bit more offline, but I think for the survey, I just want to make sure that we leave ourselves time to make sure that it's fully developed and that we're going to get meaningful feedback from it. So, so that said, if you do have additional comments on that, or I guess on any of the stuff that's in the action plan or anything that we didn't cover tonight, I would say forward those comments to Suzanne, and she will make sure that I get them, and I will review them, and I will be preparing a final version of the action plan for sometime in April, and then that will be brought before City Council, maybe also in April, and then we start planning for phase 2.
Okay.
Great. Well, thank you all for your feedback and conversation, and perspectives and good ideas. So
there's the best offer you've had all night, Sarah. Chris Lopez is a professional photographer, and he just volunteered to wander around town and take some photographs. So
perfect.
Yeah, let me know what you need.
I need 2 of each housing type, please.
I'm not a professional, but I'm available. So
John, you know the housing types. You take Chris around, and you guys.
There we go.
I would come out and do it myself. I would love that kind of field trip, but probably not in my budget to do that myself. Yeah, that would be great, and I can follow up through Suzanne about what images would be really useful to have if that's a sincere offer. That'd be great.
Very much is, and I would appreciate Councilor Oberst's assistance in locating the appropriate homes.
Absolutely.
Excellent.
And I wanted to say greetings to all my former colleagues from the Planning Commission, most talented planning commission in the state of Oregon, and it's good to see everybody's smiling faces tonight.
I thought that you were, that makes sense. Made the leap from commission to counselor. Great. Well, thank you again, everyone. Send your additional thoughts and comments to Suzanne, and she'll get them over to me, and I'll take a look. And we will let you know when we're launching the community meeting, and we'll keep you posted on the survey.
Thank you. Thanks so much for your time. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Thank
Have a
you
good night,
very
everyone.
much. As well.
All right. Thank you to our planning commissioners again for being with us this evening. Great to have you with us, and thanks for all the work you've done so far on this. This is the fun part, right? We get the exciting part, which is starting to dream and think and get community input on this, and you've done all the hard work. So we love you for that. Thank you. And excited to talk more about this and go through this more with you. But at this point, I will say we are at the end of our agenda, and I will actually entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, Counselor Oberst. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Aye.
I hear no nays. We are adjourned. Thank you all very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Madam
Thank
Mayor.
you.
Bye.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you for having us.
Conference is no longer